It's the responsibility of me and you and anyone else to you don't just have a right to free speech. You don't just have a right to this unless you defend your own right by pushing back on things.
Yeah.
You have to do it. You can't just sit around and be a coward and not say anything because you're afraid that people on Twitter are going to yell at you. You can't do it. And honestly, if you do, you kind of deserve to be subjugated. So,
You're acting like a serf.
That sounds a bit harsh, but except if you wish to accept your subjugation, then go ahead and do it. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, and with the understanding that everybody's different. People are afraid. People get concerned. People are afraid. I understand that, but I don't know what to say. At the end of the day, you have to.
There's an element where you don't want people to be. We can't have a system where every single person has to be a hero. I don't think that that's sustainable. But I do think that in a system where the individual has so much freedom, you do have a duty not to become a miniature dictator. And I think the problem is that there's an ethos of authoritarianism that is inherent in human beings. They want to subjugate themselves to something, and they want to subjugate other people oftentimes. And so if you lose touch with what it means to be a free individual and what it requires to be a free individual, then you are not one. And then you are one more piece, one other cog in the machine that is an authoritarian system. I mean, the true, kind of malevolence of authoritarianism, I think, is that it's not really just some type of system that gets imposed on people. A true authoritarianism seems to be enforced by its own people. If you think of like communist regimes, there's always an element of the population that becomes an arm of the regime. They start to self-censor, they start to censor others and to look around, and it becomes this self-perpetuating system. And because authoritarianism is a kind of psychology, it's a mentality. I mean, it is one of a person that wants to subjugate themselves to something higher. And it's a scary thing because there is something inherent in the human being that wants something bigger than it. The hope is that you find that thing for yourself, instead of making it the state. Previously it was deities, previously it was kings, but now there is not that. You don't have a deity that is larger than you that rules over you, or a king. So I think a lot of people still, they don't know how to replace that gaping hole where something larger than them used to be. So they replace it with an ideology, and that's inherently authoritarianism. I mean, whether it's fascism or communism, replacing something larger that rules over you with the state is authoritarian.
Yeah, I don't know that it's that at the moment that it's the state. It seems to be this. It is this desire just to conform to certain standards of language and behavior, which weren't even the standards 5 years ago. So,
that's the thing. It's
but,
the people.
But yeah, so
that's the scary thing.
I still believe that it is a small amount of people driving that, and then it's a larger amount of people that accept it, and then there's a huge amount of people that just don't even think about it or know that it's really occurring. And then there's a very small amount of people that will stand up to it, but it's enough, because if you have a small enough amount of people that stand up to it, you'll see very soon that the people that are actually driving the project is a pretty small amount of people too.
Yeah.
It's odd. I could speak to some specific things that I had a professor who was Romanian, and she told us during a class one time, told a story about how she had been denounced by the Communist Party in Romania, as a teacher, and this kind of shame session or whatever that she had to go through and endure, and where she was surrounded by her colleagues, and I don't know the specifics of what she did or why she was accused of this or that. I don't recall or know, and she may not have even told us, but. And I remember, and this was only not too long ago, And I remember thinking how bizarre that was, and how that could never happen. Uh, and I don't know what to say, but it is happening
Yeah, I
here.
mean, those are the Chinese struggle sessions too that happened during the
Sure.
Cultural Revolution. And I mean, it does happen here because now you're having some corporations, some businesses where you have all these like diversity, equity, inclusion people. That's just like an industry that popped up overnight and suddenly is making like, those people make like $70,000-$80,000 working on universities and working with organizations. And so there are certain programs where all the white people go into a room and they talk about how bad and how wrong it is that they're white. Or all the men go into a room and talk about how wrong it is that they are men. I mean, at this point, I just like, I know that the problem is that human beings are collectivists, like in a way that human beings are naturally collectivist animals. We want to be accepted by our group. It's terrifying to stand up against a group because historically that likely meant you were going to die. If you were expelled from your tribe, your group, you could die or you could be executed, whether it was not that you were left out in the wilderness. So, I mean,
But this is where look again. If you live in communist Romania and that's happening to you, I get it. Maybe you need to say what you need to say to stay out of the prison camp. But
yeah.
for any American to sit there and subject themselves to such things, they get what they deserve. Because you're not going to, if you're yeah, you may get fired, I guess.
Yeah.
But like the stakes, if your inability to stand up for yourself with the stakes being so low in a free, prosperous country, then
I mean,
really like
it's scary because you see what happens though is that people don't understand that the stakes are low because they feel high for them. And it's that idea that our problems expand to fill the space that we have for them. So suddenly job loss or ostracism by your colleagues that you don't really like anyway becomes the biggest threat, becomes a terror to you. And when 100 years ago, that would have been firing squads that we would talk about. Or in some places it is still. But you have to, that's where perspective is so important. And it's the idea to realize that the stakes only get higher. They don't get lower. If you're not going to, stand by your principles or stand for yourself when you feel like the stakes are high, why would the stakes magically get lower? That's not how that works. You, just like with everything, like with any individual situation, you decide what you accept from another person. You decide what you accept from your culture, from an institution, from your country. And so if you accept being treated like some type of, prisoner or some type of second-class citizen, or like you're living in an actual authoritarian regime, then that's what you get.